I can start with you, just tell me what this research you've done shows in a bit more detail.
Thank you. I think it's a really interesting story. Up until about 2 years ago, typically either the husband or the wife would file for divorce and be granted the divorce, as I'm sure your other guest Vanessa will tell us, and therefore we've been able to calculate the rate at which husbands are granted divorces compared to wives granted divorces. And one of the really strange things that we found, and I've known about this for about 10 years, so this is really an update, and this is something that the Office for National Statistics don't even produce themselves. I had to commission the data specially from them, is that the divorce rates granted to husbands, so this is not about fewer people marrying, this is about the rate at which people file for divorce. Has been, the husbands have stayed pretty constant all the way through from about 50 years ago, extraordinarily consistent. Whereas in the last 25 years, we've seen this big fall off in divorce, and almost all of it occurs amongst wives. Fewer wives filing for divorce in the early years of marriage. And we think that the best explanation for this is that the reduced social pressure to marry means that those men who are getting married are just a lot more committed, and therefore happy wife, happy life, you know the thing.
So Harry, just so I'm quite clear on this, is what you're
Sure.
saying that more men used to leave their wives, if I can put it in that way, file for divorce, and that fewer men are now leaving their wives? Is that what you're saying?
No, not quite right. I haven't explained it properly then, sorry. It's that it used to be, in the 90s, when there was a lot of social pressure to marry, a lot of men were getting married who were obviously making their wives very unhappy because they were less committed to this, because they hadn't really bought into the concept of marriage. They did it for whatever reason, social expectations, social pressure. And that they would then divorce in those early years of marriage, instigated by the wives. That's not happening today, and that's why we see fewer wives filing for divorce.
So it's fewer wives leaving their husbands rather than fewer husbands leaving their wives.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay,
better men.
I had misunderstood. Vanessa, is it not possible that this change in the number of divorces or who's leaving who could be down to financial constraints, could be down to the cost of living crisis?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I don't want to upset Harry from the Marriage Foundation. I've got the greatest of respect for you and your research. However, that is certainly not the experience of most divorce lawyers. Certainly, the reason why the rates certainly dropped off on the second half of last year was solely down to financial pressures and the cost of living crisis. We saw the same thing happen in 2008 when there was a financial crash. But we cannot accept, I'm sorry to say, that men's behaviour has totally changed in the last year or so, because it hasn't. And most practitioners voted 2023 the year of the narcissist. Now, that applied equally to men and women, I have to say, because behaviour was really bad during that period. But men haven't suddenly changed their attitudes and their behaviour radically, as you would say. What we have found is that the financial pressures have caused people to rethink. Also, there has been a definitive drop-off of people getting married, which means more people are living together, and the rate of people splitting up who are living together is twice as many as those that are failing in marriages. So what we have is a shift from divorce proceedings to proceedings affecting cohabitees. So forgive me for dissing what you're saying, but I cannot accept that men have suddenly revolutionarily changed and are all sweet and kind and loving, and women are very happy, because that is not, regrettably, what we are hearing at all.
Let's give Harry right of reply.
Thank you so much, Daisy. Thank you for that. Okay, first of all, it's not about the numbers of people marrying, because we're talking about rates here. So it's the proportion of people who get divorced out of the population of married families. We're not also talking about what's happened over the last year or two. I don't doubt that more or less people get divorced because they argue more or less about money worries. And undoubtedly, that's true. But we're talking about long-term trends here. We're looking at going back to the 90s. And it's undoubtedly true that back in the 90s, mid-90s, there were about twice as many women filing for divorce as there are today. And yet, broadly speaking, the number of men filing for divorce has stayed consistent. So, yeah, you see ups and downs because of financial worries, but the long-term trend undoubtedly is about this gender-based thing, which you can't explain to do with finance. If it was finance, then both of you would be filing, both parties would be filing for divorce. So this is a genderized thing, and it's got to be either about women putting up with bad behavior, which I doubt, or it's that men are actually behaving better in the first place.
No, but can I just interject there? We have found statistically, because we've studied this very carefully, that more men would say that they allow the women to file the petitions because psychologically it's better for them to do so. Otherwise, they would find themselves rowing more over financial and other issues. So as a matter of statistics, men often say, I will let her file. And it's just the psychological way in which men have dealt with the ending of the marriage. Of course, you're going to find men over the years that say, I want to be the petitioner. But now the no-fault divorce has come in, we are still finding that men are statistically saying, let her be the one filing.
But Vanessa, what about the behaviour that in your incredible career you've witnessed? Has there been any behavioural change that you've witnessed? For instance, is there anything to say that today's man is perhaps less likely to be unfaithful than in the 70s, 80s or 90s? Have you seen any behavioural changes over the years?
Yes, the behavioural changes we've seen is that younger men are much more likely to help with household chores than the older men would do. We also have found statistically that behaviour in people generally and due to social media has got far worse. So we know that those are the trends that we are seeing. Domestic violence is definitely on the increase, which is very sad, but not only from men, but from women towards men as well. So this has become more socially acceptable because we're seeing it on social media, we're seeing it in films and the media. So those are the main trends that we've picked up on. But I'm sure that Harry's also seen some other trends that are of very, very important interest.
Goodness, well, we could have a whole other discussion and debate about some of those trends, and maybe we will another day, but we're out of time. But Vanessa and Harry, thank you very much. Really, really interesting research.